overview of what was discussed today?
Yeah, this is, I've done a number of these over the last couple weeks, which is the opportunity to get together with business leaders and to talk about the business environment in general, see what's happening, but then a number of them have questions about tariffs. So tariffs are a big part of it. And so we had that discussion. And my goal, as I said in the beginning, I want to mostly listen, talk less, listen more, understand what's happening in their businesses and some of the uncertainty that they're feeling, what the implications are, so I can be a better advocate in Washington on behalf of them. You know, there's three meta points I made. One is that there's a lot of uncertainty around tariffs. I'll come back to that. But there's a lot of certainty in the economy right now, which they should factor into their thinking. I think there's certainty there's going to be a lot of deregulation. There's certainty under the Trump administration there's going to be real focus on energy dominance. It's going to lower energy prices and make it easier to have our energy businesses grow here in Pennsylvania. Third is I think they should have confidence we're going to extend the 2017 tax breaks, which are good for individuals, good for businesses. They should factor that in. And finally, there's been like $2 trillion of new investment announced in our country since President Trump came into office, and so that's a real source of optimism for the future of the country and the economy. That's the first point I made. Second point I made is the tariffs are designed to solve a real problem, which is unfairness. We've had unfair trading practices for decades with Europe, with Canada, with Mexico, and particularly with China. And so what we're trying to accomplish, what the Trump administration is trying to accomplish, is fairness. Reciprocity is fairness. That's going to be good for some businesses because there'll be much more competitive playing field. It's going to be good for consumers. It's going to be good for the real economy. That's the goal. And then the third thing I said is, listen, President Trump came out with his framework for how he wants to deal with this. I'm hoping and I'm encouraging him to come out with some signature deals soon, so people understand what the future looks like. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. I'm hopeful that we'll see that. And I'm also trying to understand in the meantime the implications for Pennsylvania businesses, so I can be a strong voice for them in the Senate and in my interaction with the White House.
So what are you telling farmers who are not only worried about tariffs, but also status of their labor force?
You know, I was all day yesterday, I was at family farms across Pennsylvania. The Secretary of Agriculture came in, Brooke Rollins, and you know, it was interesting. I mean, we met with mushroom farmers, we met with apple farmers and dairymen and pork farmers, or pork growers. I think the key worry they had was the uncertainty. So we talked about that. Some of them are very advantaged by knocking down these trade barriers. The dairy industry in particular, which is the biggest, the biggest ag industry in Pennsylvania. We have a huge tariffs from Canada, so if we can eliminate those tariffs, it would be great for our dairy industry. So there's many that will be advantaged, but there's some who are worried about the uncertainty. And so we talked about that in the event that these have real implications for for certain ag industries. There's potentially programs that G.T. Thompson and the Secretary of Agriculture were talking about that could be used to help farmers in this transition. That's the first thing. We talked about deregulation, which is a big deal for farmers, and that's going to be very helpful. And we talked about energy, because energy costs were a big issue. So that was sort of the group of issues that we talked about, and I think they were very impressed with Secretary Rollins.
I know this week here, a dozen Penn State students have had their visas revoked. This is a college town. They were in the court system for relatively minor crimes, retail theft. Should folks here be concerned about this situation?
Well, listen, here's sort of my basic principle on this. We are a country of immigrants. My wife is an immigrant from Egypt. So we need to embrace the fact that immigration, legal immigration, has been the driver of growth and opportunity and innovation. It's really what made America special. At the same time, we've had huge challenges with illegal immigration, or people that have been here on legal status that have violated the terms of that status. We see that with the protests at Columbia and so forth. So my view on this is we need to do two things at the same time. Be very rigorous in enforcing our immigration law, securing the border, making sure that the people here are good actors. There's been people on legal status that have stolen state secrets, that have violated campus research principles and so forth. And at the same time, continue to evolve and reform our legal immigration process, so we can still continue to be that that bright, shining light on the hill. And I think we can do both of those at the same time, but it has to start with enforcing the law.
What are your thoughts on the proposal to rescind CPB funding, Corporation for Public Broadcasting?
Well, I mean, I think my general my general comment on that is I think that if government funding is going to be used to support public broadcasting or other things, it needs to be not politically motivated. And I think, at least in the case of NPR, which you probably followed that case carefully, there's been lots of evidence, including by long-standing members of NPR, that came out and basically said this had a political agenda. So I think we saw this in the foreign aid budget. We saw in lots of other areas where what's happening is, I think with the transparency and the focus we're bringing through the DOGE effort, we're seeing, the taxpayers are seeing what their money's being spent on. So I'm all in favor of public broadcasting in the sense that we're giving neutral, objective news to people. I think it's important that our citizens be informed. But what I'm very opposed to is what appears to be a progressive ideological agenda that's permeated a lot of these programs, including NPR.
Do you have concerns about how it'll impact local stations? Because it's mostly local stations that benefit from that funding.
Well, sure. Anytime that something's affecting, a reduction in funding is affecting people in Pennsylvania, I'm worried about it, whether it's reducing the federal workforce or anything. So I represent all Pennsylvanians. So anything that's disruptive to them, I'm focused on. But at the same time, I think it's very important that our taxpayer dollars be focused on the things that our taxpayers voted us in to do. And I think that we need to be careful that we take out what has grown in our government, which is a political agenda that has taken on a life of its own.
So
Let's
if
do
that,
one,
I'm
let's
gonna-
do
I'm
one
gonna-
more.
yeah.
If I could,
Yeah, please.
I'd get one in here, but one of the reasons for the tariffs is to bring back manufacturing, but Trump has acknowledged that that process would take at least 2 years. Other economists have said, maybe 6 or more. So, my question to you is it worth the pain? Do you acknowledge that there'll have to be pain before there's positive? And Jamie Dimon said there could be he said there's a greater than 50% chance there'll be a recession. If this is good in the end, is a recession worth it?
Well, I'd say a couple things. I think if you looked at what's happened, I grew up in a town, Bloomsburg. When I was growing up, there was a carpet mill that had 2,000 workers. Today it has 200 workers, right? So what's happened in the last 30 years, the deindustrialization of America has really hurt working class families. It's taken away lots of great jobs. It's also made us really dependent on other countries for critical stuff like pharmaceuticals. 90% of the generics pharmaceuticals are made outside of our borders in China and India and places like that. Or semiconductors, where our semiconductor industry is dependent on the world. So we need to bring those industries back home, both for creating great economic opportunity, but also for our national security. Now, some of that's going to happen easily, and some of that's going to happen over the longer run. And President Trump acknowledged that. I think the key is to give business leaders, and this is one of the things that came up on the roundtable, as much clarity as possible over how the tariffs are going to be rolled out as soon as possible so they can begin to make the investment decisions. I think when the private sector, I was a CEO, I was in the private sector for 25 years, when you have clarity, even if it's not exactly what you wanted, when you have clarity on what the future is going to look like to some degree, it allows you to make investment choices. And so I think the next step is to try to give that clarity. Some industries are going to be able to move very quickly. Some are going to take a little bit longer. And, I think getting our economy is back to a more robust industrial base, more of those kinds of jobs is a worthy goal, something that we should do. And if the real economy does well over time, the stock market is going to do just fine. The stock market is a follower of the real economy. If the real economy is doing well, then the stock market is going to do fine too.
Do
That's
the
really all
means
we have.
justify the ends? Like, again, I get what you're saying, with that, but if in order to reach those goals, we need to first go through a recession, is it ultimately, worth it when you have more than 60% of CEOs?
Listen, we've been having, for 30 or 40 years, President Obama, President Clinton, President Bush, who I work for, stepping up and saying we're gonna negotiate better deals, we're gonna get fairness with China, and it just hasn't happened. So we need to make that transition. I think there's ways to do that in a way that'll be great for our economy, and so I do think it's worth making the tough choices to get there, and I think that's what President Trump's trying to do. I think the more CEOs have clarity on the outline of the tariffs, I think it's going to allow them to make those choices more quickly.